Howard Zinn has passed away, but he would be very proud of Canadians who took to the street on January 23rd, tens and thousands of Canadians, to rally against the suspension of our Parliament by Stephen Harper. And sadly, we have another case where the Supreme Court has finally ruled that Canadian government did violate the rights of Omar Khadr, a Canadian citizen who is right now in Guantanamo Bay. Harper did violate his right, but the court said that he has no jurisdiction to ask the government to return Omar Khadr back to Canada. And in fact, that the Supreme Court has to respect the prerogative power of the executive branch, currently occupied by the Prime Minister. And the late Howard Zinn has stated that a similar situation happens in the U.S., even though they have an elected Senate, and even though that they have the supposed check and balances. 1964. In the summer of 1964, President Lyndon Johnson reported attack on the U.S. naval vessels off the coast of Vietnam in the Gulf of Tonkin. The Congress took the president's account as truth and voted overwhelmingly to give the president blanket power to take whatever military action he wanted. So much for check and balances. There was no declaration of war as the Constitution required, but when a citizen of the U.S. challenged this, the Supreme Court acted as timidly as the Congress. The court never decided on the constitutionality of the Vietnam War. It would not even agree to discuss the issue. And another example, in 1972, a man brought his case to the Supreme Court. He has been conscripted into the U.S. Army, but when ordered to go to Vietnam, he had not been authorized by, he refused, arguing that the American war in Vietnam has not been authorized by the Congress, and therefore the Congress could not draft him for overseas services. The court refused even to hear his case. It takes the assent of 4 Supreme Court justices to bring a case before the court, and only 2 wanted to hear his argument. The Supreme Court claim was that such questions are political, meaning that they are too important to be decided by the non-elected Supreme Court and should be decided by the political branch of the government, those subject to election, namely the President and Congress. But we have seen the Congress has never had the boldness to challenge the President's call for war. And in Canada, we have the same case where the oppositional party do not have the boldness to challenge Stephen Harper on issue of torture, on issues of Omar Khadr's right. Recently, they have developed somewhat of a spine to continue with the Afghan detainee torture inquiry, but Stephen Harper shut down that inquiry. In fact, he shut down the Parliament so that we can no longer do the work available to question our government. And we have public officials being threatened and being pressured to be silencing themselves even when they're supposed to speak the truth. If that truth is against the government, they are going to receive punishment. Another issue has to do with the so-called democratic deficit that politicians, the media, and everyone has been talking about. The voters' turnout for the 2008 federal election was 58%, and this is very, very low compared to past elections. Many are quick to dismiss electoral reform as the answer. The media, the left wing or the right wing, the conservative paper, or even the liberal paper like the Toronto Star has stated in an editorial on this Thursday, that electoral reform would result in an even more fractured parliament, which means that more power in the hands of the executive branch. Now, I don't know how the Toronto Star came to this conclusion, but the U.S., the United Kingdom, and India and Canada are the only 4 democracies that are still using the first-past-the-post electoral system. It turns out that in Nordic countries and in growing number of European countries, the percentage of voters turnout is higher. And in all these countries, they have a form of proportional representation that truly reflect the true wishes of the voters. So maybe there's a connection between engaged audience increased sense of democracy and voters turnout. That has something to do with the electoral system.
Come all you good workers, good news to you I'll tell of how the good old Union has come in here to dwell. Which side are you